What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris. And again, thank you guys so much for your support these last couple of episodes. I've had a lot of really exciting guests on, a lot of powerful stories, a lot of powerful platforms come on. Today's special guest comes to me from our mental health group, the Mental Health Movement on Facebook. You can find us. We are a private group, but everybody is welcome. She wanted to do a little collaboration because she herself is also a podcaster and she is a mental health dietitian. So please help me welcome Dekeira. Dekeira, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing great. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm really happy that we got to schedule this and make it happen.
Yes, of course. Me too.
So let's dive into it a little bit. Let's start with how you got into doing what you're doing. Tell the listeners just how you got into working in the mental health community.
So last year, I was going through a breakup, and at that time, I felt like something in my life needed to change. And that's when I started really diving deep into well, I've always been very interested in mental health even before that, because backtracking back to high school, I learned about the gut-brain axes and how our gut and brain are connected. So therefore, what we eat impacts how our brain feels. And so I've always been interested in that. And then going forward, I did not realize how much anxiety I had throughout my whole entire life. And so after the breakup, I realized that like my mental health is kind of shit because I have so much anxiety that I've never really faced before. And I've always just like ignored it or like didn't really take it seriously. But the breakup forced me to like really face it. And then I decided at the time I was trying to build my business and I wanted to choose a niche. So I was like, what should I do that I've always been very interested in? And I was like, oh, mental health. But then I was like, I want to be very like more specific than that. So I was like, okay, well, I haven't really dealt with depression that much in my life, like maybe like a handful of times, but I've always been a very anxious person. So I was like, okay, maybe I can just do anxiety and teach people how to eat for their anxiety. So ever since, I've just been the anxiety-free dietitian, and I just focus on helping people to eat for their mental health.
I love that. Did you take any classes or anything for that, like a certification or anything like that?
So as a dietitian, I have to go to undergrad, I have to get my master's degree, I have to do 1,200 hours of supervised practice, and then I have to take a state licensure test. So I've been a dietitian for over a year now, but when it came to mental health, there isn't a certification to get in it. It's mainly just using my nutrition knowledge to know that the gut brain axes, which is how the gut and brain communicate, um, how it works and how we can eat to nourish our gut. Because if we focus on our gut health, then that's going to improve our brain health. And when it comes to learning more about brain health, it's mainly just been a lot of my own self-research from reading books, listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, listening to certain professionals in the field that are knowledgeable in quantum physics and subconscious mind and subconscious reprogramming and things like that. But it's mainly just like my dietitian knowledge that I focus on gut health.
Okay. So going back to, when your journey began and, kind of hitting that like little trauma spot with your relationship, I like how you said that you wanted to be a little more specific going into the mental health field because I feel like some people just kind of like put that blanket statement on there, like, oh yeah, I'm a mental health advocate. I'm like, okay, what are you advocating for? Are you advocating for BPD? Are you advocating for depression, anxiety?
Right.
And I've always found it interesting that it always takes that really, really hard, thick brick wall for
Yeah.
us to finally see, like, wow, my life is in shambles right now. I
Yes.
need to get on the other side of this brick wall. And I've always found it a lot easier to get through something by helping other people get through it too. Because
Yes.
it essentially, and this might be just me, but I feel like it gives you that extra strength to push forward with what you're struggling with when you're helping others get through that same journey. I don't know if you feel the same way towards that.
I do feel the same way because I started my anxiety niche in the midst of like the breakup, but
Hmm.
I do find out the more I learn, then I am more prone to want to help people because I don't want to help people from a state where I'm not that knowledgeable yet, but I will serve as motivation as I'm going through it. And then the more I learn, then the more I teach.
Right. So with your being a dietitian and everything, are you taking on clients regularly, or is it just kind of like a you put yourself out there to people you know need the help, or how does that process work?
So I was previously taking clients. Right now, I am not. I will take a client upon request if needed, but my main focus is just social media education on nutrition when it comes to mental health. So just pushing out a lot of um, educational content around gut health. And then also I have my own podcast and I have my own app where it's a subconscious reprogramming app that has a bunch of mental health tools and manifestation tools to help you basically manifest an anxiety-free life. So my main focus right now is my app, my podcast, and then also just putting out nutrition content onto social media, but also I have a YouTube channel where I make like affirmation tracks for mental health, subliminals, and then motivational quotes that I try to post daily just to help people keep going.
I love that. Um,
Mhm.
my friend, I saw her about a year ago. She told me that she was pregnant and everything, and I've known her for like 20 years. So I wanted to get her a special gift. And I found she likes pandas, and I found this card game where it's not just any ordinary card game. It's every card is an affirmation card, but you scan a QR code and it takes you to this podcast where they read you the affirmation and then they give you a little
Oh,
background story with that too. Um,
okay, nice.
how does one go about creating an app? Because I find that really interesting that you also created an app. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I listened to this podcaster. Her podcast is the Law of Attraction Tribe. I'm not sure if you're into manifestation or like
Yeah,
universal laws and stuff.
definitely.
So yeah, so on her podcast, she talks about how she was really depressed in her corporate 9 to 5 job
Mhm.
and she had kids that she wanted to be home with, but she was stuck at this job trying to make her ends meet, basically. And she was just very, very, very depressed. And she came across an advertisement to create your own app as a
Mhm.
source of passive income to create financial freedom. And she came across this platform called Passion.io, and she created a manifestation app. And ever since, she was able to quit her corporate job, leave the 9 to 5, and generate 6 figures monthly for herself. And so she
Wow.
can spend time with her kids. Her mental health improved significantly. She no longer has depression, anxiety, or anything like that. So after listening to her story, I was like, I need to create my own app as well. So she had an affiliate link with the company to create their own app. So I created my own app with that same company. And ever since, I just mainly focus on promoting that. And my app, it's called the Anxiety Free It Girl app. And girl is spelled Gworl. It's available on Apple and Google Play. And I have affirmation tracks on there, subliminals, sound healing frequencies, mantras, affirmative prayers, meditations. I have like everything on my app. So she was my inspiration for the app. And it was a very fairly easy process with the company because they do everything for you. And typically to get an app developer, it costs like thousands and thousands of dollars, like $50,000 and up. But to create an app with them is $1,000 or less, depending on, I guess, which thing you choose. And they make it so easy. Like they do the whole entire thing for you. All you have to do is just like upload your content, choose your templates, choose your colors, things like that. Promote it on your own, of course. But then like all of like the back handling stuff, they deal with it for you. So it's been like a very seamless process and it's just been amazing so far.
That is phenomenal. Um,
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up your podcast because that's actually something I had written down too. I love the way you spell girl. And I want to know where how you came up with that name because I believe the podcast title is the anxious IT I'm sorry, the anxious it girl. How did you come up with that name?
So it girl is like a terminology where it's like you know you're that girl like Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian like you're an it girl. And then on social media there's been like a trend where people spell girl like GWORL instead of like regular girl. I don't know why. I think it's because like the accent like girl. And so I like that a lot. I think it's really funny. And I was coming up with a bunch of different names and I want to find one that I feel like is like that's the name that I want. And so being that I focus on anxiety, but I know that I'm also an it girl, I was like, I'll make this the Anxious It Girl podcast because it's for the girls who know that they're that girl, but they have mental health issues that
Yeah.
they need to work through in order to really become the highest version of themselves. So I found that was like the perfect title for my podcast.
Right. What is the layout of your podcast? Like, do you have guests on there? Is it just 30 minutes of like affirmations and information, or what's the format of your podcast?
So my podcast combines mental health, nutrition, self-care, and spirituality topics. So I am very I try to go very much with the flow, like very intuitive, to stay in my feminine energy as much as possible. So I will do a podcast at least once a week, sometimes more than that, but I will do whatever feels good in the moment and what comes to mind. So whether I'm feeling to talk about nutrition or mental health or spirituality, and then if I feel like batch creating content, I would just write out a list of things I want to talk about, record them all, and then schedule them out. But it's mainly just episodes. And I have guests on Instagram Live, but then I
Okay.
convert the Instagram Live into an audio, and then I'll upload that audio onto my podcast. So my podcast does have guests on it, but it's because of Instagram Live that I did. And I don't really put affirmations on my podcast. I only have one episode that has anxiety and depression affirmations, but I have a bunch of affirmation tracks all on my app for like anxiety, depression, having a peaceful life, manifesting money. So I have all of those tracks on my app.
I love that you separate the two because I feel, I've been doing this podcast for almost 3 years now.
Oh,
And
wow, congrats.
thank you. When I first started it, I wasn't sure the direction I wanted to go with it. The original thought process I had behind the app was to, look up information on specific mental health topics and, talk about the things that, gets buried on the internet. There's millions and millions of bits of information on mental health stuff. And I would share my personal stories in there, and it just, it kind of got to a point where it's like, okay, like I like this direction, but what more do I want to do with it? Like, do I want to
Yeah.
bring people on? So one of the first guests I had on there, she works with a police station in North Carolina, and she, helps train them on suicide and crisis situations. And I read her book and everything, and it's talks about like de-escalating. So after I got her, then I'm like, I kind of like interviewing people because you get different perspectives. I've
Yes.
had anywhere from therapists to musicians to artists to holistic healers. And when I started looking up some of the stuff that you were doing and hearing you talk about the things that you separate your podcast and your app, I always find it really incredible that there are so many of us in this community and we all do
Yes.
something completely different from each other.
Yeah.
Um, so where do the affirmations come from for you? Are they from, stuff that you're reading? Do you come up with them every day, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so before I even answer that question, I wanted to
Mhm.
let you know there's actually only, being that you said that there's very limited information on the internet about mental health, there's actually only like a handful, literally a handful of mental health dietitians, and I'm one of them. And a lot of people don't even know the correlation between your nutrition and your mental health, because
Right.
if they did, we would barely have like as much mental health issues as we do now. And it's also because doctors, not to discredit doctors or anything, but they only get 1 to 2 classes on nutrition during med school. And some of them actually don't even get classes at all on nutrition. Like I have a friend who's currently in med school and she doesn't take any class on nutrition at all. So there is a lack of education on that in our system. And I think that's like the main reason that's causing so much mental health issues in society. So I make it very much a goal and a focus of mine to tell people as much education on nutrition as possible to help with their mental health. And being that I combine nutrition with subconscious reprogramming to answer your question now with affirmations. So to even backtrack to what an affirmation really is, it's basically like a quote for those who do not know that you affirm to yourself. You can do it once a day, multiple times a day. You can robotically affirm to really saturate your mind, because what it does is that it creates new neural pathways in your brain that allows for you to change your mindset and to rewire your mind for positivity versus negativity. And so with affirmations, I create them myself or I'll use Chat GPT, or I will write down things that I feel as though I'm struggling with, and then write the opposing sentence next to it. So if I feel as though I have a fear around not having enough money, I'm going to say the opposite, which is going to be, I always have more than enough money. I live a life in overflow and abundance. So that's one way that people can create their own affirmation. And the key is just consistency and repetition. So constantly affirming your affirmations, constantly repeating them to the point where it saturates your mind and creates that new neural pathway that's then going to attract more of what you're affirming into your life through the law of attraction.
I love that. So to share something a little personal with you, because you mentioned the writing down the thing you're struggling with, but also countering it with an affirmation. Um, I had a therapy session one time with my current therapist, and was telling her I was struggling with really dark thoughts and I didn't know how to get rid of them properly. And I was struggling for a really long time with them. And she's like, all right, I want you to get a journal and I want you to do basically what you said, except a little bit of a twist. So writing down those negative thoughts and what you're thinking, but calling it the compassionate observer. And it would be basically creating a dialogue between that negative voice with a positive voice and kind of like a conversation with yourself. And I know that
Yes.
joke goes around like you're not crazy unless you're talking to yourself kind of thing, right? Um, and it started helping a lot because I just took it upon myself to end it with "I love you" to myself. And when I read my first entry to her, she was kind of blown away because she's like, I don't think I've ever had anybody actually do that assignment and actually like knock it out of the park like that. So I love affirmations and I think they are heavily undermined by so many people
Yes, for sure.
because it's kind of like along the same sentence of when people tell you to just breathe, right, and think
Yes,
positive thoughts, and it's like you can take that for base value or affirmations, and
yeah,
affirmations are so powerful.
they
And
really are.
I'm a really big believer in changing your mindset if you do that enough, once a day, twice a day, and I think that's where a lot of people struggle is
Yes, for sure.
they don't know how to positive self-talk because it's hard to get rid of that negativity once you're stuck in that mindset. But if you
Yeah,
start doing it enough, you start cleaning out all that darkness, all that garbage.
exactly. Yeah. And basically, what you did is a form of subconscious reprogramming because it's taking something that was in your head and you transformed it into something else. And now that's your new reality. So that's what you're going to see going forward. And that's how affirmations like really, really work. So I find it to be very powerful. And a step further from affirmations are, do you know what subliminals are?
A little bit, but remind me what they are.
So they're basically audio recordings that have affirmations wired into them
Hmm.
that bypasses your conscious mind. So your conscious mind cannot hear it, only your subconscious mind can. So that helps a lot of people better than affirmation sometimes because our conscious mind is the ego mind. And let's say you want to affirm that you are rich. Your conscious mind be like, no, you're not rich. So it may block you off from even believing it, and then that's going to cause more resistance. But with a subliminal, because your conscious mind, your ego mind does not hear it, only your subconscious mind hears it. Your subconscious mind is where it runs your whole entire life. You process up to 11 million thoughts at a time in your subconscious mind versus your conscious mind can only process around 4 thoughts at a time. So when you're hitting your subconscious mind with the thought, I am rich, with repetition and saturation, it's going to eventually believe that you are rich. So that's how affirmations, well, that's how subliminals work. And the more subliminals you listen to, the better, especially as you're sleeping, as you're waking up, or as you're falling asleep, because your brain's in that theta state, which is a state in which it's very receptive to believing whatever it hears. So subliminals are like affirmations on 1,000. Like they hit your subconscious so strongly that it just helps to accelerate changing your mindset.
That's definitely something I want to look into myself as well because yesterday I had interviewed a young lady. Her name was Sonia, and she's a holistic healer as well. And we were talking about like the benefits of therapy and the benefits of holistic healing. And I said, do you feel like that therapy can kind of reinforce those negative thoughts? Because in therapy, we're just talking about what we're struggling with for the most part, right? And you know, I had a friend ask me like, how long do you plan on being in therapy? And I've never thought about that question because like life without therapy just sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
And I asked her, I'm like, do you think that holistic healing is more beneficial than therapy? She's like, I'd say yes and no. The yes part would be because holistic healing would be like a physical release of those that negative energy, whereas talking about what you're struggling with is kind of reinforcing that negative thoughts, but with that
Yes.
validation at the end of it.
Yes, yes, exactly what you said. So, for those who are not aware, there's universal laws, one of them called the law of attraction, which states that like attracts like. So basically, what you keep affirming to yourself is going to continue to be your reality. But if you change that, then it's no longer going to be a reality. And with therapy, I'm in therapy myself. I do believe therapy is beneficial because it helps to basically get out that gunk and all that deeply rooted trauma you have within you. But what's more beneficial than therapy, in my opinion, is coaching. And I think what's really powerful is combining therapy with coaching, because therapy is more so you expressing yourself and getting rid of that stored trauma. But then coaching is very progressive and forward moving. Like, okay, you have this trauma, but now what are you going to do about it? How can we move on from this? How can we heal? What can we do to change it? So I think coaching with therapy is like a very powerful combo. And then also, like what she said, with releasing the stored negative energy in your body, that comes from holistic healing from somatic workouts, which is basically as energy stored in the body. So, for example, women who have a lot of issues with their menstrual cycle or have a lot of issues with like their uterus, whether they have PCOS or uterine fibroids or cervical cancer, it is known that they believe that that comes from sexual trauma that has been stored in that area. So when you
Wow.
can release that energy from that area, then you can basically heal yourself. So that comes from somatic workouts and somatic movements such as like yoga, or Pilates, things like that. But everything is energy. So when you have that energy stored inside of you, if you can physically remove it from like shaking or moving your body however you want it to, or like doing a lot of hip workouts and hip dances, that can remove that trauma from your body as well. So I think a combination of therapy, coaching, and then holistic healing is like the ultimate, like obviously I can't say what's a cure and what's not a cure
Yeah.
for like purposes of not misleading people. But
Sure.
in my personal opinion, I think that is like the ultimate cure to like healing just your whole entire body.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, I'm really happy that people, I'm actually really grateful that I got, not told, but just kind of got that explanation and answer of the therapy thing because I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's like, you know, our body has energy. You know, you have energy with your heartbeat and you have energy with your, you know, stress and everything. And, you know, when you like go to a massage and they go, oh, your shoulders are all tense, and that's all that stress, that's all that negative energy that you're just balling up, just waiting
Yeah.
to be released, right? And I think the biggest thing that I struggled with pretty much my whole life was expressing emotion because as a man, we're told not to cry. We're
Yeah.
told not to talk about those things because men don't do that. Now, when I started therapy and I was able to start expressing emotion, now there's that, okay, you're talking about all the things that you were not allowed to talk about as a kid, that you
Yes.
were basically said, no, no, don't talk about your depression. Don't talk about the fact that you've tried to unalive yourself. Don't talk about none of that. Now that I'm able to express it, it's my struggle is now finding that next step is like, okay, you've acknowledged that you've gone through all these things. Now, how do you get rid of it and how do you change? Because
Yes.
most of my life has been surviving and catching
Yeah.
up essentially. And
I feel that for sure.
I feel like it's like you said, it's not talked about enough about taking care of our bodies when we're younger and growing up or by our parents if we had parental trauma like I did. Um, I watched a father who has never gone to a doctor probably maybe once or twice in his entire life that I've been alive. And I took that habit and I did my best to break that cycle. Um, and I broke the cycle of my mother's that she created of going from relationship to relationship and have never been in a relationship before.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where, have you ever felt like you're behind everybody else because you see all these people have kids, have a house, have family, so on and so forth. And then you have to remind yourself you've been playing catch up for these last 5 years because you were never told how to handle trauma, how to handle depression, how to handle anxiety. And now that I know how to handle all those things, it's taking that next step. And I think that's why therapy scares the shit out of a lot of people
Yeah, it does. I think it's
because
because of like all of like the things that have to come out.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like so many people are not willing to do the work of what therapy requires. And I think that's an important thing to bring up in this conversation because even if you're doing the holistic healing and you're doing therapy all on the same thing, you still got to put in that work. You got to be willing to do everything that they're telling you to do, that they're advising
Yeah.
you.
I have three things I want to say.
Yeah,
The first thing, well, two things.
mhm.
There's a book. Do you know Louise Hayes?
I've heard that name.
She has a corporation, I know a corporation, I guess, a company called the Hay House. She's now deceased, but she basically popularized affirmations.
Mhm.
And she has a book called You Can Heal Your Life. And there's a free audiobook version of it on YouTube. If you like physical books, you can also order it as well. And throughout the book, she explains that feeling tension or stress in certain parts of the body causes certain things. So, for example, having resentment stored in your body for long periods of time can lead to cancer. Having sexual trauma can lead to reproductive cancer, like if you have cervical cancer, uterine cancer. She had cancer of the uterus, and it's because she had sexual trauma as a kid growing up. So that book, if anyone wants to start anywhere with learning about different emotions being stored in your body and what diseases they can cause, that book is really amazing. You can heal your life. And then the second thing I want to mention was you talked about your bringing up your past and saying, okay, how can we go forward? There's a book that I'm currently reading called Parallel Universes of Self. And it's very much a spiritual, woo woo, quantum physics book, but it talks about neuroplasticity, which is how we can rewire our brain. And basically, what the book is saying is that time is a social construct and that the past, present, and future are all one thing. But as a society, we've been taught to believe that it's all separate. So
Mhm.
people will think that their past defines them and that it's permanent. But you can actually do something called rapid resolution therapy. Have you heard of that?
No, I don't think I have.
It's a type of therapy that's been created by Dr. I think his name is Jim or Joe Connolly.
Mhm.
And it's basically a therapy that has helped people to alleviate years and lifelong worth of trauma in one therapy session. I have not done it, but a lot of the podcasters that I listen to that are into manifestation do rapid resolution therapy on a regular basis. Um, and basically, what it does is it makes you go back into the past and think about what has happened to you that has caused you trauma, and for you to rewire it and restructure in a way where that did not really happen, but you choose the version of what you wanted to happen. So, like, let's say, for example, as a kid, you were abused by a relative. You can go back in your mind and think of those times where that's happened. And instead of you thinking that you were abused by that relative, you can choose to think that you actually were not abused by that relative and think about it over and over again until your mind believes the new story. And then that way, that past version of that trauma no longer resonates with you and it no longer affects your current reality or the future. Of course, it takes a lot of mindset work. That's a lot. Like, like we're not taught these things. And on top of that, it's kind of telling you that like something that has caused you trauma literally does not exist in quotation marks if you don't allow it to exist. And another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is the third part, is the subconscious mind, which runs your whole entire reality, was developed between the ages of 0 to 7. So all of the thoughts that we have now that basically run our life on autopilot, like how you said, you had to break the habit of not going to the doctor and of hopping from relationship to relationship. while you were in your mother's womb, you inherited all of her subconscious thoughts and all of the thoughts that were present outside of your mother's womb. So if you in your mother's womb constantly was you were hearing your dad say negative things, your mom say negative things, as you were born up until the age of 7, those thoughts and beliefs formed your own subconscious thoughts. And after the age of 7, those thoughts solidify into your actual beliefs. So going forward, you're going to have the same thoughts and beliefs as your parents, because after the age of 7, you're no longer in that theta state, which is a state of your brain in which you are the most receptive to believing everything that you hear. And then going forward, that's going to be your reality, or those thoughts and beliefs that you were hearing from ages 0 to 7. So that's why affirmations work to really rewire the subconscious mind, because you're taking all those things that you were taught from ages 0 to 7 and you're rewiring it and then changing your reality to attract more of what your new identity is.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about the 0 to 7. I that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
When you really
that's
think
why
about
kids
it.
are so gullible.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what was the therapy you mentioned? It's a rapid resolution, right?
Yes, rapid resolution therapy. And I think his name is Dr. Connolly. So it's based in Florida.
Yeah.
That's where the company is. But apparently it heals people, like people have healed their not healed. People have healed their PTSD in one session. I have a history of OCD. People apparently have healed their OCD in one session. It heals like years of trauma in like one session, or for some people it may take a few sessions, but that's like the whole premise of it, and apparently it's like transformational.
So me being a really big movie guy, the first movie that reminded me of, have you ever seen The Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher?
No, I don't think so.
So it's essentially you said rapid resolution therapy, right? It's
Yes.
essentially like that, except he had a really bad history of blackouts because his father had something wrong with his brain where his brain was hemorrhaging and stuff. So he would write down like every day of all the events that happened. So as he got older, he found his journals when he was moving or whatever, and he would transport himself essentially back to when that traumatic event happened and change something about it, and it would
Yes.
shape his whole future. um that movie is really trippy.
Yeah.
Highly recommended if you like movies, because it's that's the first thing that came to mind when you said that.
That's actually really interesting because that is literally what RRT is. It's basically you rewiring the past. And that's what the book, The Parallel Universes of Self, that's what that book talks about, is you changing your past. And there's another subconscious reprogramming tool called scripting. Have you
Hmm.
heard of scripting?
I've heard the term. I'm just not familiar with the definition.
So it's basically what he did, except you are journaling about what you want your life to be, and you're speaking from the version of your higher self. So, like, let's say right now you identify as being poor, as being broke, which I don't recommend because power is in the tongue. So whatever you speak over your life is what you're going to get. But let's say you are going through a lot of financial hardships and struggle right now, but you script every day as if you are rich, you are abundant, you are wealthy, you are prosperous, money flows to you with ease. You have great financial success. The more you script that out, the more evidence you're going to see of that in your life. And the likely you are to, it's not even likely, but it's going to happen. You are going to attract that reality into your life by just scripting it. So how he basically was writing down everything and rewriting your past, you could write down things right now that you want to be your future and speak of it as if it's in the present tense or in the past tense, so that you can trick your brain into thinking that it already happened, so that it can happen in your future going forward. You don't want to speak it script as if like I will be rich, because then you're going to basically manifest a waiting period of being rich versus you affirming, I am rich now, I
Mhm.
am wealthy now, I made $10,000 yesterday. Then all the reality has to do is catch up with you. And then you're going to see what you are journaling in your future sooner or later.
So essentially, it's more or less kind of like manifest in a sense.
Yes, that's basically what it is. It's just you writing out your manifestation. So I am rich. I have perfect mental health. I never dealt with anxiety or depression before. Just basically like not that you're ignoring it, but you're rewiring it for something new.
Right, right. So let's get back to your platform a little bit. I know you had mentioned that you have, I believe you have a storefront as well.
Yes.
Do any of the proceedings go to a nonprofit or anything, or how does transactions work with your storefront?
So all proceedings go to me,
Mhm.
because all of it is like my own source of passive income. So my app goes to me. I also have a 7 for $7.28 manifestation scripting bundle package. So it has 7 different packets of different ways to, like one of them is to manifest a life free of financial anxiety, a life free of general anxiety, a life free of health anxiety, because that's one thing that a lot of people deal with is health anxiety. So that goes to me as well. And then my Amazon storefront that also goes to me. But I only create and post things that I know are going to help people
Right.
and that I have tried myself and that I know will resonate with, again, other people as well. So everything that I post is for the betterment of the overall population and helping them with their mental health. I donate when I can. Like, for example, right now I'm running a fundraiser for Hurricane Beryl that affected the Caribbean because my parents are from two islands that were hit, Grenada and St. Vincent. So I'm currently running a fundraiser for that so I can buy supplies and send it back to those two islands. But pretty much everything goes to me.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really important that you mentioned that you share stuff only you've tried and that you wouldn't just like say, "Hey, buy this. I think it's going to help you," kind of thing. Because
Yeah.
um, I feel very strongly on this of saying that there are so many people in this community that I feel are in it 100% for themselves and not trying to help other people. I've seen it with really big content creators, and it breaks my heart seeing them take advantage of people. Um, and I always feel like it's so hard to see who the genuine people are in this community, especially if you're looking for their guidance or you're looking for sessions or whatever it is with them. And I had tried to collab with some bigger content creators, and I understand people got to protect their platforms sometimes because it's like, oh well, you don't have nearly as many followers as I have, so I can't be seen with you, kind of thing. And my thought process is always, aren't we trying to do the same thing? Aren't we trying to help people? I'm a little confused of like this weird illusion of social status and social media. It's just
Yeah.
such a weird time that we live in.
It really is. Because I don't know if you're into feminine and masculine energies or if you are aware of that.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. Uh-huh.
So I try to, as mentioned before, I post from an intuitive standpoint of what I feel right now is going to hit my audience the best, in
Yeah.
which it can help them. So when I make my quotes on my YouTube channel, like the shorts that I make and I post in the group chat, I'm like, okay, what can I post today that's going to help somebody that is currently helping me right now? And then I'll create that and post it. And I feel as though that even being genuine in itself creates more of the reach you wanted to than you being ingenuine and posting things just to post for whether it's for money or for glory, whatever it is, because it's your vibration. Energy is everything. And if you're coming from a place of love, which is one of the highest vibrational frequencies, you're going to receive that back. But if you're only thinking about yourself and thinking about what, like if you post this, I'm going to get money, then you're only going to really attract more negative situations in your life. So I come from a very genuine place. I post things that people request me to post. So I have an app user who she'll frequently ask me, can you create an affirmation track for this or for that? And I'll make it and I'll post it on my app so that everyone can have it. So I recently created an affirmation track for living a peaceful life. And I also there's another subconscious reprogramming tool called rampaging, which is basically like you talking to yourself, but you're talking to yourself for something that you want. So like I created a free mental health rampage on my app called I Have Perfect Mental Health. And it's basically just me going on for 5 minutes about how my mental health is so perfect. I never deal with anxiety and depression because I'm happy every single day. I live a very joyous life. And it's just me going on and on and on about how I have the most perfect mental health. And so it's free on my app. So for those who want to listen to it, you can. And by you constantly listening to that, you're going to saturate your mind with the belief that your mental health is perfect. And then you're going to see that in your reality. So I do things on what I think is going to help the person that day, because everything is energy and you attract people that are within your field of what you're vibrating at. So then I'm going to be attracting people who need to see that message for that day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I love the fact of, just rewiring the mindset and just creating those affirmations to just change your outlook on life. And I think that's so important. So one question I just kind of wanted to ask was, what is your main goal and intention in the community? Like, do you have like a overall goal? Like, I know some people want to do retreats, some people want to do workshops, some people want to uh, get bigger into doing sessions with people. Do you have a bigger goal in mind or intention?
My goal right now is to get 600 app subscribers, because my app, for me personally, is like an all-inclusive cure for like bettering your mental health. That's just my opinion on my app, because
Mhm.
I combine nutrition also with subconscious reprogramming, because there's lots of things in nutrition, such as having certain vitamin deficiencies, the order in which you eat certain stuff, um, how you eat certain things that can all cause anxiety. And so by combining your gut health, or bettering your gut health with combining subconscious reprogramming tools for your brain health, I find it to be a fail-proof system for alleviating yourself of any type of mental health distress. So my main goal right now is to become the #1 mental health app in the world, because I am combining both. And that's just my main thing right now, honestly.
That's a hell of a goal. I love it. I So being a podcaster myself and just advocate with our group and everything, every time I look at all these other podcasts and look at some of these other groups, and you just see some of their content, sometimes you find yourself doom scrolling, I guess is the best way to say it. And you just look at their follower count, you look at all the people that are in there, and most of it's like dead. It's like nobody's talking, and sometimes they'll get a lot of interaction, sometimes they won't. And when I think to myself of what my goal is to be, it's of course you want to get the message out to as many people and you want to get as many people involved in what you're doing. And I hear people talk about, oh, well, we just made chart, we just did this, and we're the highest podcast this week. And it's like, when I think about all that stuff, it sounds like a pipe dream. It's like, yeah, wow, that'd be really cool. But then when you think about it again, it's like, but how many of those people genuinely got there on their own and
Yeah.
didn't like buy their way to the top? You know what I mean? Because that's the unfortunate reality of the society we live in is money runs everything, right? And
Yes.
I've heard some brilliant people that I feel like should have billions and billions of followers, and they don't. And it is what it is. The one person that may need to hear that episode or see that post or hear that affirmation is going to hear it and may or may not thank you for it. Um, and I think that's the most important part of what we do is getting that message out to that one person.
Yes.
I feel this for myself. Sometimes it's discouraging to see, those analytics of, oh, well, you only got 5 listeners to this episode. And it was like an hour and 45 of one of the best conversations you personally felt like you had. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. What is your viewpoint on seeing like analytics of like your content? Like, does it discourage you at all? Or how do you work through that aspect of what you do?
So I am 100% believer in quality over quantity. For me, at least before, I used to care about how many followers I had or how many people were listening, but I don't care anymore, because at the end of the day, who is listening is meant to listen to it, and it's going to help them in one way or another. And if I can help at least one person, then that's all that matters. And that's why I want my app to get more popularized, because the tools I have in my app, I know they're going to help people. Because I used to be an extremely pessimistic, negative person, where I thought, like, I had this very victim mentality of like the world's out to get me. Only bad things happen to me. And I kept attracting negative situations in my life because I had such a negative mentality. And ever since changing that, my life has substantially changed for the better. And I want other people to know that as well, because through society, through the media, through the news, through the shows we watched, we have been indoctrinated and basically hypnotized to only really think negatively and to only see negative things because it keeps us in a loop of lack and of scarcity and of fear. And people don't know that. So me being that I know that, I feel like it's my goal and purpose for people to understand that all these divisive tactics going on in the media and the news and seeing all these negative things is like they're saturating us with negativity.
Yeah.
So the more people I can reach and teach them that, yes, this is the current reality in which you are seeing, but it's not what it needs. It's not what it how do I say this? It's not something that needs to be your reality if you can switch your mindset. So for me, as long as I get some type of feedback of whether I helped one person, a few people, that's all that honestly matters to me. Because I know that by me helping people through the law of compensation, I'm going to be divinely rewarded anyways through helping people from the genuinity of my heart and that the fact that I want people to know these things.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer for that because I feel I want to piggyback off of something you had mentioned with the news and TV shows and movies that have just had us hypnotized for almost our entire lives and are still, unfortunately doing that. I feel there are so many content creators that have also figured that out how to do that to other people. And
Yeah,
I want to use a specific example because one of my big talking points just in my platform and the group and the podcast is male suicide. It's something that gets brushed under the rug. It's something that's really bad that not a lot of people are talking about. So found myself doom scrolling on TikTok one day, and you know how that goes sometimes where
yeah.
you'll see a horrible video and then you'll see 20 more just like it, if not worse
Yeah.
than the other. So I was going down the rabbit hole of just doom scrolling, and I came across one interview that this guy was walking on the street and him asking just younger college age women, "Oh, do we need men? No, we don't need men." The next interview, same kind of thing, but they're like, "Oh, well, we don't care about them expressing their feelings." Same thing. Next video, it was um, some talk host, I don't know who it was talking to Cher and asking her, "Do we need men?" And she's like, "For what?" And it, again, just reinforced that negativity.
Yeah.
So I had brought it up to my therapist, and it really upset me. Like I was really angry about it because it was, I believe that was in the same week that the man who played Green Power Ranger, I believe his name was Jason, Tommy, Jason. Tommy was the character's name. Um, and it was that same week that happened, and that really messed me up because like seeing somebody's genuine take their life like that, and then seeing all those interviews, brought it up to my therapist, and I said I came across like 6 videos of all the same thing, and every response was worse than the last. And I said, "What the hell is going on with our society, and how do you move past that?" So her response was, "These videos are being created for reaction. They are
Yeah.
not real video. They are not real interviews. They are not real uh, responses from real people. Because if I go down the street and I talk to a random stranger, hey, how do you feel about men? Like, do you think we have a place in life? 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to get at least a decent answer. I'm not going to
Yeah.
get, we don't belong here kind of thing. And it kind of like snapped me out of being upset about it. It's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Because if you go down Instagram, you see it on both sides. Oh, well, women do this, no, men do that. And it's like, okay, I see what you guys are doing, and it's off my algorithm completely now.
Yeah, it's all like a divisive tactic because what you focus on grows, and it's also because of the law of attraction. So if you continue to see the same thing that's negative, you're going to see that more in your reality. Me personally, I only on social media platforms, I only follow positive, healthy pages that focus on spirituality, the divine, feminine and masculine, um, mindset, manifestation, money mindset, because the more you saturate your mind with these things, the more you're going to see it. So I rarely ever scroll on TikTok because of that same reasoning. I mainly focus on what I like to call high vibrational platforms. So I like Pinterest a lot because it has a lot of inspirational quotes and affirmations on there. My Instagram page, I only follow nutrition and like mindset things. Same thing with Threads, YouTube. My YouTube subscribers, I only subscribe to people that talk about mindset, manifestation, mental health, like because that's what my reality is. And in manifestation, if you do not put reaction towards something, technically it does not exist. Because it's the emotion that you are feeling it that makes it present in your life. But like, so like, for example, you scrolling on TikTok and seeing all those videos, by you reacting to it and like getting upset, it's making it something real.
Yeah.
But if you ignore it and be like, that's not true, that's not my reality, it's technically not real. So it's like what you focus on grows. So that's why, and being with all like the divisive tactics that happen in the media, even like not to get into politics, but everything happening with politics and also men versus women type of thing, there's so much negativity towards both genders
Yeah.
from both sides that I used to participate in, but not anymore because I feel as though just as how women have a place on this earth, so does men,
Yeah.
obviously. And we need both masculine and feminine energy. Both genders need both because the masculine energy brings structure, it brings discipline, it brings
Compassion.
compassion,
Yeah.
authority, being the provider and the protector versus the feminine energy brings that nurturing, caring, more emotional standpoint where men are more logical. So you need both energies to exist. But social media shows so much of like how men ain't shit and men do this and men do that and women are the same as men and things like that. And I don't want to identify with any of those negative stereotypes of men and women because then I'm going to see more of that in my reality. And I just listened to a podcast episode by this. I want to actually, it's a really good episode. So I want to share it on here. It's this podcast called let me find it. It's really, really good. It's called Your Manifesting Bestie Podcast. And
Mhm.
she released an episode called What You Are Seeking is Seeking You. And so she said, if you keep associating with identity that all people are bad, all men are negative, all men cheat, men this, men that, every man that you attract into your life is going to prove to you that that is true. But if you start scanning people for the good in them versus the bad, then the men that you attract are going to be the men that you are seeing as good. And she described it as like a man on the beach with a metal detector. He's looking for things in the sand. So if you're looking for negativity, you're going to find negativity. But if you're looking for positivity, then that's what you'll find. So I like to listen to Danny Morell. I don't know if you're aware of him.
Mhm.
He's a podcaster that talks about, he teaches people about the divine masculine energy and the divine feminine energy. And I also listen to two YouTubers, one named Stefan Speaks, who
Mhm.
speaks about the divine masculine men, their role in society, and talks about like dating and relationship advice. And then there's another guy called Seals the Man who
Mhm.
teaches women about how men think. Because people don't realize, I'm sorry, I'm like blabbering right now,
No,
but
no, you're okay.
I think the misconception in society that people don't realize is that men and women are literally two different species. The way we think and operate are so different, but there's so much miscommunication around it that like women think men are stupid and men think women all have attitudes and that they're bitches. Not saying that that's the reality, but that's what is in the media, all because of the miscommunication of how we think differently. Men are biologically wired to be more logic driven. Women are biologically wired to be more emotionally driven. So if we understand both genders and their minds and how they work, all of this beef between men and women wouldn't even exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
So it's just crazy.
one of the things that I noticed on social media for some reason, there are so many people that play into the man versus woman thing, and I will never understand it because I shouldn't have to put men's mental health matters too. It should just be a men's mental health matters, and I'm not saying it matters more than the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It should be equally the same thing. And I had people attacking me because I said two, and I'm like, bro, like I'm not even attacking you. Like I'm
Yeah,
trying to uplift you guys, like all of us. I don't understand why I'm getting so much anger towards me because like we see the numbers. The
yeah,
numbers aren't something that we're just making up, and it's just it blows my mind that there's so many people in this universe that feed into that narrative of men versus women. And it
yeah,
should never be like that. And I had to unfollow a lot of accounts myself because that's all it ever was.
yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of this podcast. It's called the Whatever Podcast. I don't know the gentleman's name, but he usually has like new school feminists on there, and he like has conversations with them. And I don't know why he does it. It's more like a gotcha podcast for him to prove that new feminism just isn't the way to think, in his opinion. I don't know. Anyway, rambling on that. But again, just kind of pushing back on that men versus woman thing, and I hate that we're here as a society because it should never be like that. But with the news, social media, and just I feel like relationships nowadays are just so difficult to form now because of this. This is
Yeah.
all that people are looking at. We're not looking at each other. We're not connecting. We're not having those conversations. Um, but yeah, that's my rant on that. Sorry.
That's
um,
okay.
so what do you feel is the biggest stigma that you faced throughout your journey in this community?
Definitely the fact that I have OCD and anxiety. Well, I don't want to identify as having OCD because I can definitely change that. But being that, for one, a lot of Black people don't really believe in mental health being like a thing. And on top of that, not just Black people, but foreign people tend to what's the word? Invalidate that mental health is a real thing. So I'm not sure if you have parents that are from a different country or not, but they typically have this mindset where you're meant like there's no such thing as having anxiety or depression. You just go through life and you just deal with it. And my parents have a lot of trauma from their childhood, especially growing up in the Caribbean,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of emotionally unavailable people in the Caribbean, and that causes a lot of generational trauma. And so I have one parent that's emotionally unavailable, and that caused a lot of trauma because of the narcissistic tendencies that were displayed all throughout my childhood. And I actually forgot where I was going with this. But wait, what was the question again? Oh my gosh.
Just the stigma that you faced.
Oh yes. So they basically like in the Caribbean, and I'm not saying this is all Caribbean islands and all people in the Caribbean, but it was very much a thing back in the day where it's like, what are you talking about? Like, don't talk about these things. Like you don't want people looking down on you or people thinking bad about you. Because evolutionary wise, we're all meant to survive in packs. Because if you were not in a pack, you were a loner, and you were more of high risk to get killed. So when you live in a family unit or in a clan, basically, it's for protection, it's for survival. So anything that makes you look bad, that can isolate you from your pact, can basically decrease your chances of survival. And that's kind of how the Caribbean mentality is. It's like they don't want people looking down on you, talking bad about you, knowing that you're going through any type of struggle or distress because you're supposed to maintain this poised, perfect appearance.
Hmm.
So that's the mentality that I kind of grew up with one parent. So my feelings and emotions were not really acknowledged growing up as a kid. And even when I was diagnosed with OCD and anxiety, I don't even know if my parents really believe that I even have it. Not to talk bad about my parents or anything, but I don't know if they take it seriously.
Yeah.
Same with other relatives. So it's been a lot of me advocating for myself because I feel as though my feelings have been invalidated a lot as a person of color and as a person of foreign descent. So it's mainly me sticking up for myself and for other Black people who are also of Caribbean descent that your mental health is real and that yes, anxiety and depression are real. It's like same thing with men. It's like people don't take it seriously that men also have mental health issues. And that's what I've dealt with personally. So I advocate a lot for people of color, especially Caribbean people and their mental health. So that's where I've been like stigmatized.
Right. I had an African American woman on here, I believe 3 or 4 guests ago, I believe, and I asked her a similar question about what she has seen or experienced, like stigma wise, and she had mentioned the same thing, that she said that the black women are just viewed as the strong point of the family, and that they
Yeah.
never struggle. And I'm like, I never thought about that until you go back and look at TV shows and how those women were presented, like
Yeah.
always strong, never struggling, and always the top of the family, and they could deal with anything. And everything that's underlying there, it just isn't talked about. So I have really good friends that traveled from Puerto Rico, that are from Cuba, that are from out of the country, that have told me similar things of that's how it is, in the island mentality of you don't talk about those things. You don't talk about
Yeah.
mental health, and you don't talk about what grief is doing to you and things like that. And I've always found it pretty interesting how different mental health is viewed around the world, because I think the furthest I've interviewed out to is Denmark. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, she had a lot of like wild stories that she told me. And it's just like, is this real life? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell am I listening to? But just listening to all the different stigmas that exist, and I've noticed that a lot, especially with people that are from the islands, people of color, and just of that descent, is it's heartbreaking to hear that even now it's still like that. It's not as, I guess, not as bad as it was 30,
Yeah.
40 years ago, but it still exists and is very much very real.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that it also stems from slavery
Mm,
because during slavery, a lot of, not a lot, but all of the Black people that were enslaved, and not even just Black people, but there's also like the Indian indentured servants from India, things like that. Um, Families were broken up, their relatives were killed in front of them. They were sexually abused, physically abused, mentally, like all types of abuse possible, they've endured and experienced. And that leads to emotional unavailability. Like when you're abused, you can, that just leads to being emotionally unavailable because you don't have the emotion or the mental capacity to even deal with your emotions if you're being abused
yeah,
and your feelings are not being acknowledged. So being that people of color were slaves for so many years, and studies actually show that generational trauma is genetic.
yeah,
So it's just been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And this is the first generation to really acknowledge generational trauma and to break the cycles of emotional unavailability that has led to anxiety, depression, narcissism, things like that. And so in Caribbean households, being that we're all descendants of slaves, basically, there's so much trauma that has been passed down that has caused a lot of emotional unavailability, just caused like narcissism and bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. And now that we're acknowledging it, we're able to break the cycle and fix it going forward. Like, I'm like the first person in my family to even be an advocate for mental health. Like I have relatives that are in the same loop cycle of lack, scarcity, money fears, um, just thinking that like all these negative things that does not have to be true. And it all comes from slavery. It
mhm,
literally is just generational trauma. Like, for example, like with white people, Caucasian people that have never been through slavery,
mhm,
they have been set up for success throughout history because they had the resources, the laws were in their favor, they had the money to set up businesses for themselves, to get the help that they need to set up that generational wealth that people of color were not able to do because of slavery and certain laws that kept us down. And
yeah,
that all again plays into the role of how we are purposely all being divided to keep one race or gender superior over the other, when in reality, we're all, it's cliche, but we are all the human race.
yeah, yeah.
Like it doesn't matter whether we're black, we're white, we're women, or we're a man, like we are all humans. We all have the same emotions and feelings, and we should all be treated equally as such.
I agree 100%. And I feel like That's another conversation. Equality is such a really hard conversation among genders, among races, and you know, when that discussion is always had with our leaders, it just always, you hear so much ignorance and hear so much
Yeah,
tone deaf responses. It's like, dude, like, I understand that there are so many people that don't want to acknowledge all the bad shit that has happened, but you can acknowledge it, but also move forward with it. Put your
yeah,
best foot forward. We don't have to sit in the all the negative that had happened, but ignoring it is not going to help anybody.
yeah,
Like, taking things out of history books because you're afraid it's going to hurt somebody. Okay, I understand banning books. I understand the conversation. I've heard every argument under the book for it. But I also feel like getting rid of history for younger generations is not going to help anybody.
yeah,
It's just going to get to a point where I'm not saying keep all these prominent figures at the top of the food chain that were awful people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying acknowledge that those people existed and acknowledge that this is not the way of the world that we should be heading.
yeah,
And go, again, like you said, they're feeding into the divisiveness. They're feeling into the or feeding into the equality conversation and then the wage gap and everything else. And it's just always such a tough conversation because people can't seem to pull their heads out of their own asses.
yeah. It's very much an ego-driven conversation and argument. Because at least for me, I used to be very caught up in like the whole, and this is not to bring politics into this, but I used to be very caught up in the whole Trump versus Biden and things like that. And then when I took a step back from looking at politics and the media that I was absorbing, when you look at it from an outside point of view,
Mhm.
it's literally all meant to just keep us divided. That's literally what it is. It's like it's not for our better good. It's like it's just to keep us divided because when there's division, someone can come in and conquer.
Yeah.
So that's why I personally no longer listen to the news. I don't listen to anything negative. I don't really listen. I listen to music, but I listen to more podcasts than I
Mhm.
do to music. I listen to more YouTube videos and music because the lyrics that we're being fed, the messages in the media, the messages on the news are just all negative, or just it's just a loop of lack and negativity that is reinforcing these negative beliefs into our realities. And I no longer want to identify with that. And it's
Mhm.
like what I said before, where you focus on growth. If I choose to focus on healing the world, positivity, unification of all races and gender, I'm going to continue seeing that. But if I continue to focus on oh, Trump is racist and so is Biden and this and that, then I'm going to keep seeing that in my reality. And I don't even want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think about those things anymore. It's traumatizing and it's annoying at this point. Like
I
it's
agree.
really annoying. Like I don't want to deal with that anymore. So I choose to not engage in those conversations anymore and to not look at
I
that media
respect that
at all.
1000%. And I had mentioned something, the events of yesterday. We're not going to talk about it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Um, but I had mentioned on Twitter. I said, the difference between me and many of you, I'm not going to attack you on your political view. I just want peace. That's
Yeah.
all I care about. And I understand how people were brought up to support whatever party they support. And at one point I did support one sole party. And after the last 8 years of what we've had to go through and watching that debate and just listening to the responses to questions that we're all worried about, that we give a shit about, that we're worried about this border crisis, we're worried about childcare, we're worried about real world issues, and we're sitting here talking about golf.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, I was talking to one of my best friends, and I told him, I said, this is why I don't talk about politics with anybody, because
Yeah.
we're a laughing stock to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody who is out of this country looking in are laughing at how stupid we are. And
Yeah.
again, but that's neither here nor there. And I just, again, feeding into that divisiveness. And at the end of the day, I just want peace and happiness for everybody. I don't want to ever have conversations that'll lead to hate and arguments because it's not worth it. It's not worth
It's
that energy.
not. Yeah. And I used to be very big on arguing with people and always getting my point across. But at the end of the day, that arguing is such a low vibrational emotion. And if you continue to resonate in those low vibrational emotions, you're going to attract low vibrational situations to happen to you.
Mhm.
So that's why I don't even, like you said, I just want peace and happiness for everybody. Because another thing is that I feel like Americans see America as the whole entire globe.
Right, right.
Like we're very much a self-centered country where
Mhm.
we think that what's happening here is the only thing that's happening in the world. But there is thousands of other countries in which these things are happening, but 10 times worse, or where they're not happening at all. And it's like where it is happening, it's all again, same thing. It's divisive tactics being used in media to separate people based on their skin color, their religious beliefs, their political views, and all of which I do not choose to identify with because it's like, what's the point?
Right. And it's gotten to a point where it's so exhausting to just have
Yeah.
one conversation about it. And I remember getting into a gigantic fight with my godmother. This was in the middle of the pandemic, and we all know how crazy that was for everybody.
Yeah.
And she would constantly like hate reply on some of my posts, and I messaged her. I'm like, "Hey, I would never do that to you. Why are you
Yeah.
doing that to me? Like, I have respect for you. Like, I don't understand." So after we had that conversation, she left me on Reddit and didn't reply. I'm like, okay, so in one ear and out the other, I got it. So she did it again after I sent that message. And I sent her another message and I said, if you can't respect that we have different views, um, I no longer need you in my life. And I'm
Yeah.
just going to remove you. And her reply was, wow, LOL. I'm like, okay. The immaturity that comes with the political conversation is insane.
Yeah. It's crazy. It really is crazy.
Um, so at the end of every podcast, I usually ask all my guests this. If you could change one thing in this community, what would it be?
Definitely the school system and what we're taught, because we're taught absolutely nothing about the subconscious mind,
Facts.
subconscious reprogramming, mindset is everything. And we're just taught a bunch of irrelevant bullshit to kind of keep us indoctrinated into thinking that we were put on this earth to be workers, when in reality, we're all meant to be prosperous. Like, no one is supposed to be living in poverty, supposed to be poor or anything. Like, we're meant to be living on this earth prosperous, but we're taught that we have to go to school, we have to go to college, we have to get 9 to 5, and then we're spending the rest of our lives in a 9 to 5 paying off debt and being in this scarcity mindset, thinking that money is the root of all evil and that money doesn't grow on trees, when in reality, it's not the root of all evil. Money is a tool that can improve the lives of many people, but that's a whole different topic. But the school system and what we're taught about our mindset and what we're taught about money,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think like that's what I would change 100%.
I agree. I always say the only thing I learned out of the 12 years of being in school was the most I got out of school was psychology class. That's literally.
Exactly. And it's because it's relearning about how the brain works.
And what's crazy about that is the one lesson came from a TV show called Robot Chicken, and it was about grief. And that's how I got through my brother passing away, and how my really good friend passed away in the pandemic. Um, I couldn't tell you anything else I learned in school.
Yeah, trust me.
Completely useless.
I don't know. It was all just BS. And it's like the more you learn, the more you realize that your whole entire life can be controlled through your mindset.
Yep.
If you choose to stay with thoughts of fear, anxiety, depression, and yes, to an extent, these things can be chemical imbalances, but through rewiring the conscious mind, you can literally balance back those chemicals and manifest an anxiety and depression free life. So people understood the power of the mind. And if you want to know someone who is really good at this, Dr. Joe Dispenza, if you look up his books, his YouTube channels, he helps people cure themselves from all types of diseases and things just from changing their mindset alone. Like your mindset can literally make or break you. So you can either choose to be, there's a quote, it's like life can either be a prison or a playground. You choose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And through your, like, I'm really passionate because your mindset literally dictates your whole entire future.
Absolutely.
I'm very big on subconscious reprogramming in your mindset for sure.
So at the end of every podcast, as I mentioned before we start recording, I love to read a quote based on either the topic that we're discussing or the guest that I have. I know you said you had something before we recorded, so if you want to read yours before we close out.
So one quote that I live by, and I affirm this every single day, is that everything is always happening. Well, everything is always working out in your favor, and everything is always happening for your greater good. Like in the midst of being in a very stressful and negative situation, if you take a step back and look at it, think about what it's teaching you
Mhm.
and how you can apply that moving forward. Because the most negative thing that can happen to you is happening for your greater good. It's always going to work out in your favor. So I love that quote. I live by it. And I feel like once you really ingrain that quote into your head, nothing can bother you. Like
Yeah.
nothing can really affect you. So that's like my favorite quote.
One of the best things I heard was life happens for you, not to you. I think it's
Yes.
one of the most powerful things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Um, so before I read my quote, where can our listeners find you on socials?
So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and Threads at Anxiety Free Dietitian. I have my own podcast called the Anxious It Girl Podcast. Again, girl spelled GWORL. And then my app, the Anxiety Free It Girl app, available on Apple and Google Play.
Awesome. So the quote that I have, it has author unknown because of course it does. Um, and it reads, an unhealed person can find offense in pretty much anything someone does. A
Yeah.
healed person understands that the actions of others has absolutely nothing to do with them. Each day you get to decide which one you will be.
Yes, and I love that quote also because when you come from a more healed place, you realize that no one is genuinely a bad person. I true and I was thinking about this today, ironically. That's so weird that you said that quote. But I was like, I think everyone is a good person, but the way we go about how we express ourselves and how we treat people is just based on our own traumas.
Yeah.
But at the
I
end of the
think
day,
everybody's a good person, but maybe not have the best intentions for everybody.
yes, yeah, and I can agree to that. But I just feel like people, everyone has their own traumas.
Sure.
And if you think someone's a bad person, they may not be a bad person. They just may have trauma that they never dealt with, and now they're emotionally unavailable and bringing that onto other people. So that's a really good quote.
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of panicking because I thought I had a quote before we started recording, and before you joined, um, I was like, all right, I need to really look for one. I'm like, oh my god, this is a really good one. So glad I found that. Dekeira, I just want to thank you so very much for reaching out and for coming on the podcast. Um, this has been a really eye opening and great conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank
Of
you.
course. And for all my listeners, as always, thank you guys so much for supporting every episode. Just remember, I'm available on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, pretty much anywhere now that you can get a podcast. Just recently got onto Pandora. So if there are still Pandora users on there, I'm on there now. But until next time, guys, as always, be well and be gentle with yourselves. Much love, guys.